Family of the missing teen says this is 23-year-old Gregory Groom. They say he was dating 18-year-old Kylie Montero, who is 3 months pregnant. Now, Groom is facing charges of aggravated assault and battery on a pregnant person and intimidation of a witness. Now, they say those crimes happened on August 6th, and Kylie was last seen on the 7th. And
it's August 7th, 2023, in Rehoboth, Massachusetts. The clock ticks down to the evening. But for 18-year-old Kylie Montero, the day will never end. She vanishes without a trace, 3 months pregnant, and in a single moment, her life turns into a mystery. Her last words, "Something's not right." What happened to Kylie? Who can be trusted when everything is uncertain? 3 months pregnant and living at a shelter for pregnant teens, Kylie's sudden disappearance shocked her family, friends, and the small town of Rehoboth. The last known message she sent, an ominous warning that something wasn't right, raised even more alarm. But who could have been responsible for her disappearance?
First off, a huge thank you to all our returning viewers. Your support means the world to us. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment and let us know. But if you're still not subscribed, we've got to ask, what's holding you back? Tell us in the comments. We're listening. Your voice matters, and subscribing is the best way to keep these important stories alive.
Kylie Montero's life was shaped by a series of heartbreaking events that marked her early years, casting a shadow over her formative years. Raised in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, Kylie was no stranger to hardship. Both of her parents had passed away by the time she was a teenager, leaving her with a profound sense of loss and abandonment that would haunt her throughout her youth. The death of her mother, followed by the untimely loss of her father, thrust Kylie into a life of uncertainty and emotional turmoil. Without a steady home base or the guidance of parental figures, she struggled to find stability. As if dealing with the loss of her parents wasn't enough, Kylie also faced the harsh realities of bullying during her school years. Social media posts and reports from those close to her painted a picture of a young woman trying to navigate a world that had shown her little kindness. At school, she wasn't just dealing with the usual pressures that come with being a teenager, she was facing ridicule and exclusion from her peers, a difficult burden for anyone to carry. Her emotional scars from bullying only deepened the pain of losing her family. Her teen years became a battle to find a sense of belonging, to heal from the wounds left by a life marred by loss and cruelty. But even in the face of these hardships, Kylie still managed to find moments of light. She graduated from a Tabo high school, proudly sharing images of herself in her purple cap and gown on social media. Yet, the victory of this accomplishment was shadowed by a life that felt increasingly out of her control. The death of her beloved uncle was another devastating blow, adding to the long list of emotional burdens she had to bear. The support systems that were supposed to help Kylie were weak or non-existent, and it seemed that every attempt at finding stability was met with more turmoil. Kylie's teenage years were not just defined by loss, but also by the kind of resilience that often goes unnoticed, resilience that was tested time and time again. But it's often in these deep emotional struggles that the seeds of vulnerability are sown. Kylie's ability to hide her pain behind smiles and photos and moments of normalcy may have masked just how fragile she had become. Kylie's emotional struggles didn't go unnoticed by those around her, and it's clear that her vulnerabilities were gradually becoming more pronounced as she entered adulthood. The pattern of loss, bullying, and emotional neglect would leave anyone susceptible to dangerous situations, and for Kylie, this proved to be true. She found herself in an on-and-off relationship with Greg Groom, a figure who had been both a source of comfort and tension in her life. Their relationship had reportedly been fraught with arguments, emotional turmoil, and even allegations of physical altercations, though specifics were still murky. Could these unresolved tensions have played a part in her disappearance? Kylie's emotional state was fragile at the time of her disappearance. The pressure of living in a shelter for pregnant teens was just one part of her story. She also had to grapple with the ghosts of her past. Her friends and family reported that she had become increasingly withdrawn, often retreating into herself after conflicts with Greg. These relationship issues, coupled with the stress of her pregnancy, created a perfect storm of emotional instability. In fact, her last message to a friend, expressing a feeling that something wasn't right and that she didn't feel safe, serves as a chilling reflection of how vulnerable Kylie truly was. Her vulnerability wasn't just a result of the immediate problems she faced, domestic issues with Greg, living in a shelter for pregnant teens, but rather the accumulation of years of emotional hardship. The emotional neglect she had faced growing up, combined with the constant instability, left Kylie with very few coping mechanisms. As the cracks in her emotional armor deepened, the incident that would follow, her sudden and unexplained disappearance, began to feel almost inevitable. What happened to Kylie, however, was not just a tragic event, it was a consequence of the lack of support and care that she so desperately needed in her life.
It's possible that Kylie's final actions were a reflection of just how overwhelmed and vulnerable she had become. Did she run away to escape, or was something more sinister at play? Her fragile emotional state, coupled with a history of domestic conflict and emotional instability, may have clouded her judgment and made her more susceptible to dangerous situations. If there were ever warning signs, they were not easily visible, but they were there, hidden behind the emotional weight she carried daily. In the end, the tragic disappearance of Kylie Montero serves as a stark reminder of how hidden struggles can often lead to heartbreaking consequences. The lack of visible signs didn't lessen her vulnerability, it only masked it until it was too late. August 7, 2025 started like any other day for 18-year-old Kylie Montero. The sun shone down on Rehoboth, Massachusetts, where she had spent much of her life. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day, with Kylie making her way through the typical challenges of a pregnant teen. But little did anyone know that this day would be the one that would change everything.
Kylie had been living at a shelter for pregnant teens in Pembroke, Massachusetts, an institution designed to give young mothers-to-be a safe space during their difficult pregnancies. Despite her circumstances, she had managed to share moments of joy with family and friends. Yet the complex emotional turbulence of her life, coupled with the pressures of her pregnancy, had started to weigh heavily on her. The night before her disappearance, she had had a heated argument with her boyfriend, Greg Groom. Their relationship had long been on and off, marked by emotional instability and occasional physical altercations. This was not an isolated event. Reports from Kylie's family indicated that the relationship had been fraught with tension, and the arguments between the two were often intense and unresolved. On the morning of August 7, Kylie had made the decision to leave the shelter. She had plans to visit Greg's house to pick up some of her personal belongings. This was not an uncommon scenario for Kylie, who had been trying to sort out her life in the midst of an emotional storm. But this time, something felt different. Friends and family close to Kylie later reported that she had confided in them about feeling unsettled, and that she had expressed concern that something wasn't right. She had tried to reach out to her sister Faith, who offered to pick her up, but Kylie declined. The sense of unease she mentioned to her friend, combined with her decision not to take up her sister's offer, set off alarm bells. This was not like Kylie. Her family said she would never just disappear without a word. Kylie arrived at Greg's house that day, and according to reports, she seemed visibly shaken. It's unclear what transpired inside the house, but it's believed that she was there to collect a few items she had left behind. Given the context of their troubled relationship, it's not difficult to imagine how the atmosphere might have been tense. During the visit, there was a significant argument between Kylie and Greg. What happened behind closed doors remains uncertain, but the emotional fallout was clear. Kylie, feeling increasingly unsafe and distraught, made the decision to leave. In the hours following her departure from Greg's house, Kylie's behavior grew more erratic. She sent a message to a friend, mentioning that something didn't feel right and that she didn't feel safe. This message would later become one of the last known communications from Kylie before she vanished. It was alarming, to say the least. Kylie's words were cryptic, almost like a desperate cry for help. Was she truly in danger, or was her emotional turmoil clouding her perception of reality? It's impossible to know for sure, but it's clear that her sense of safety had been shattered, and she was spiraling emotionally.
By this point, Kylie had made the decision to walk away from the situation. In her state of emotional disarray, perhaps she felt she had no other options, no other way to escape the overwhelming pressures in her life. The physical and mental toll of the argument with Greg, coupled with her fragile emotional state, may have led her to make a rash decision, to leave, to run away, and to distance herself from the toxic relationship and environment she found herself trapped in. It's unclear if she knew where she was going or if she simply wandered in a state of fear and confusion. Her last known location was near County Street in Rehoboth. Kylie was seen leaving Greg's house, but after that no one could confirm where she went. As the hours passed and her family grew more concerned, the investigation began to unfold. Kylie's phone went silent, her social media activity ceased, and her whereabouts remained unknown. Her family reached out, desperately hoping for any sign that she was okay, but as the day wore on, it became clear that something was very wrong. Kylie's emotional and mental state in the days leading up to her disappearance was fraught with uncertainty and instability. Living in a shelter for pregnant teens, away from family and friends, only added to her sense of isolation. Though the shelter was meant to provide her with a safe space, it was clear that the emotional strain she faced was wearing her down. The decision to leave the shelter and visit Greg's house was not an ordinary one. It marked a turning point in her life. She had become increasingly withdrawn in the days leading up to her disappearance. Reports from friends and family indicated that Kylie had been struggling with the weight of her circumstances, her pregnancy, her strained relationship with Greg, and the lack of a stable support system. Kylie's fragility was visible in her interactions with others. Her message to a friend, "Something's not right," was perhaps the clearest indicator of how trapped she felt in her own life. What Kylie couldn't have known was that this was a moment of foreshadowing, one that would soon become hauntingly prophetic. The sense of fear that she mentioned, though never fully explained, suggests that she might have been on the verge of making a desperate decision, possibly driven by the overwhelming pressure she was under. The emotional weight of her situation was immense. She was pregnant, estranged from her parents, caught in a toxic relationship, and living in a shelter far from home. Her fear may have led her to feel that running away was her only option. The emotional trauma from years of loss, bullying, and relational instability, compounded by her pregnancy, may have made her feel like she had no safe space to turn to. Did Kylie truly believe running away would give her the freedom she desperately sought? Or was her disappearance the result of something far darker, something that no one, not even her closest family members, could have anticipated? As the investigation continued, law enforcement struggled to piece together the details of Kylie's last known moments. It's possible that in her heightened emotional state, Kylie made decisions that, in retrospect, she might not have made had she been in a clearer frame of mind. But the fact that she had reached out for help, sending those last words about feeling unsafe, points to the overwhelming psychological toll that Kylie had been facing. Whether she fled in fear, whether she was coerced into leaving, or whether something far more sinister occurred, the emotional triggers that led to her disappearance cannot be ignored. The question remains, was Kylie simply running away from her fears and her broken world? Or was she running straight into an even more dangerous reality? We've shared some pretty heavy details about Kylie's case so far. And if you're still with us, it's because you care, just like we do. If you haven't subscribed yet, what's stopping you? These stories need to be heard, and your support means we can keep telling them. Don't leave us hanging. Drop a comment letting us know your thoughts on this case. What do you think happened to Kylie? And if you're not subscribing, let us know why. We want to hear your perspective. It's time we all start paying attention.
This could be someone you know.
The investigation into Kylie Montero's disappearance began swiftly as local authorities realized the gravity of the situation. With no clear evidence pointing to her whereabouts, police were forced to act quickly, knowing that every passing hour could make the difference between life and death. The investigation launched immediately after Kylie's family reported her missing. Within hours, the Rehoboth Police Department, aided by state and federal resources, began the search in earnest. Police began by canvassing the immediate area around County Street, the last known location of Kylie, and expanded the search area as the day progressed. They utilized canine units trained to track scents, hoping the dogs could catch a trail that would lead them to her. The dogs were brought in to search for any signs of Kylie's presence, and their efforts were primarily focused around areas close to Greg Groom's house, where she had last been seen. As the search continued, investigators expanded their efforts to include drones equipped with thermal imaging cameras. This was particularly useful in combing dense woods and areas that would have been difficult to search on foot. Despite these extensive efforts, including hours of drone surveillance and ground teams scouring nearby forests and reservoirs, no tangible evidence of Kylie was found. The situation was increasingly dire as time went on, and there were no immediate leads. However, law enforcement wasn't without resources. Kylie's digital footprint became a focal point of the investigation. Officers accessed her social media accounts and reviewed her recent activity, trying to piece together any clue that could suggest her location or state of mind. The last posts from Kylie had been a series of seemingly normal photos and videos, including some shared on her TikTok account. But her sudden absence from social media after her disappearance was more alarming than the posts themselves. Investigators delved into her phone's location data, hoping it could lead them to the spot where she had last been. Unfortunately, this too provided limited answers, as Kylie's phone had been turned off or had no active signal after she left Greg's house. Then came the breakthrough. Investigators sought data from Kylie's and Greg's cell phones. With a warrant, they began tracking the movements of both individuals. They were especially focused on the time surrounding Kylie's disappearance, whether Greg had been in the area at the time she went missing, and if his movements aligned with any suspicious behavior. However, this process was slow, as cell data retrieval and analysis are often time-consuming and require meticulous cross-checking to ensure its validity. The police also turned to vehicle tracking systems, hoping to trace any cars that could have been involved in Kylie's disappearance. As the investigation continued, every new lead was met with both hope and skepticism. Investigators were up against the clock, knowing that with every passing day, the likelihood of finding Kylie alive was diminishing. Still, they kept pushing forward, gathering any shred of information they could. One of the most pivotal figures in Kylie's disappearance investigation was her boyfriend, Greg Groom. While he was not immediately named a suspect, he was quickly identified as a person of interest due to his close relationship with Kylie and the events leading up to her disappearance. Greg's behavior following Kylie's vanishing raised significant suspicion. According to reports from investigators and family members, Greg remained largely silent in the days after Kylie's disappearance. This silence contrasted with what one might expect from someone genuinely concerned about their missing partner. Instead of actively participating in the search or reaching out for help, Greg's behavior became increasingly evasive. His refusal to cooperate fully with investigators led to further scrutiny. Was this silence a defense mechanism, or did it indicate guilt? Psychological profiles of individuals in cases like this often show that the behavior of those closest to the missing person is crucial. In many cases, those with something to hide display signs of emotional detachment or unusual behavior patterns. For Greg, this meant no immediate signs of distress and a noticeable delay in his willingness to engage with authorities. While there was no direct evidence linking him to Kylie's disappearance, his actions, or lack thereof, became one of the key points of focus for investigators. The psychological profile of Greg, coupled with the tension in his relationship with Kylie, raised more questions than answers. Was there a deeper, more troubling history between them that could have led to her disappearance? The relationship had reportedly been rocky, with allegations of emotional strain and unresolved conflicts. Could an argument or a violent altercation have pushed Kylie to leave in fear for her safety? Or was there something more sinister at play? Something that had been building under the surface for months. Investigators conducted multiple interviews with Greg, as well as family and friends, hoping to uncover any patterns or signs of escalating behavior. They asked about his interactions with Kylie, his whereabouts during her last known moments, and whether he had any information on where she might have gone. In these interviews, Greg remained tight-lipped, offering little more than standard answers. His refusal to give detailed accounts of his interactions with Kylie during their final hours together only raised further suspicions. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the case might not be as straightforward as everyone had hoped. While there was no immediate breakthrough and the search continued, investigators started preparing for the legal aspects of the case. This meant piecing together enough evidence to either clear or implicate those closest to Kylie, particularly Greg. The first step would be gathering evidence that could support or contradict the notion of foul play. Law enforcement began to collect physical evidence from the scene at Greg's house, hoping to find anything, no matter how small, that could indicate an altercation or provide a timeline of events leading up to Kylie's disappearance. They examined any security footage from nearby areas, but nothing conclusive emerged. The legal process would take shape if Greg were to be formally implicated. With no body and only circumstantial evidence, prosecutors would face a significant challenge in moving forward with charges. In such cases, the prosecution would likely focus on proving a pattern of behavior that pointed to foul play. They would look to Greg's emotional detachment, his inconsistent statements, and the troubling dynamics of his relationship with Kylie to build a case. They would also present any forensic evidence from the scene, hoping to find traces of Kylie that could tie the case together. On the defense side, attorneys for Greg would no doubt aim to discredit the circumstantial evidence. They would likely argue that Greg's silence was simply a response to the intense pressure of the situation and not an indication of guilt. They would focus on the lack of physical evidence linking him directly to the crime, asserting that the case was built on assumptions and theories rather than solid proof. The defense could also challenge the reliability of witness statements or digital evidence, trying to create reasonable doubt. If the case went to trial, the jury would be tasked with determining whether there was enough evidence to convict. The prosecution would aim to present a compelling narrative of Kylie's disappearance, linking Greg's behavior to the broader context of the case. The defense would work tirelessly to cast doubt on these connections, raising questions about the validity of the evidence and the motivations behind the investigation. Though Kylie's case has yet to see any major courtroom developments, the focus on Greg Groom's actions and his behavior during the investigation would likely play a central role in any future legal proceedings. Whether or not the case proceeds to trial, the questions surrounding Greg's involvement and the ongoing search for Kylie remain unresolved, keeping the case in the public eye. In the absence of concrete answers, the legal process is often slow and fraught with uncertainty. But the investigation continues, as each piece of evidence and every piece of testimony could be the key to unlocking the mystery of Kylie's disappearance. As the public waits, the hope for justice and closure remain at the forefront of everyone's mind.
Kylie Montero's disappearance reverberated far beyond the small town of Rehoboth, Massachusetts, sending shockwaves through her community. Kylie had been a familiar face, well known within her circle of friends and family. Her absence left an emotional void that rippled throughout the town, leaving a sense of disbelief and horror in its wake. As the investigation unfolded, community members rallied together,
offering support to the family, helping with the search, and providing tips, even as the case became more complex and increasingly difficult to crack. But despite the best efforts of the local authorities and volunteers, no clear answers emerged. For her family, the pain of uncertainty was unbearable. Kylie's sister, Faith Montero, became the voice of the family, constantly appealing to the public for any information that might lead to Kylie's whereabouts. She expressed deep concern for her sister's safety, stating in interviews that the circumstances surrounding Kylie's disappearance felt off, and that it was unlike her sister to just leave without a word. Faith's emotional plea resonated with many, capturing the heartbreak and fear that Kylie's loved ones were living with each day. The disappearance also sparked a wider conversation about the safety of young women, particularly vulnerable teens in unstable living situations. Kylie had been living in a shelter for pregnant teens, which should have provided a secure environment, yet it was clear that the emotional strain of her circumstances had left her exposed. Kylie's story became a wake-up call for many, highlighting the gaps in safety and support for teenagers facing significant personal and familial challenges. It underscored how vulnerable teens like Kylie can be, especially when they feel they have no stable support system to rely on.
Kylie's case remains unresolved, and the search continues. Despite numerous efforts, including the use of drones, canine units, and a dive team scouring local bodies of water, no physical evidence has been found that points to her location. There are still no confirmed leads, and the growing fear that Kylie may have met with foul play looms larger with each passing day. Kylie's family, particularly her sister Faith, continues to hold out hope that she will be found safe. Faith has publicly stated that she refuses to believe the worst and continues to cling to the belief that Kylie may be hiding out or disoriented, though the chances of this scenario occurring without any sign of Kylie for weeks now seem increasingly unlikely. As of August 20, 2025,
family or household member. A not guilty will enter. You have the right to an attorney. Would you like to sign a waiver and represent yourself, retain private counsel, or see whether you qualify for court appointed, sir?
Significant developments have emerged in the case of Kylie Montero. After months of uncertainty, Kylie's remains were discovered on August 19, 2025, at the property of her boyfriend, Greg Groom, in Rehoboth, Massachusetts. This discovery marked a tragic conclusion to the search for the missing teen, which had captivated the community and the public. Greg Groom, who had been a person of interest in the case, was arrested and charged with Kylie's murder following the discovery of her remains. Though he had remained largely silent during the investigation, the new evidence linked him directly to the crime, leading to his apprehension. The authorities are now awaiting confirmation from the Chief Medical Examiner's Office regarding the cause of death, but this breakthrough has already brought some measure of closure to Kylie's grieving family. For Kylie's family, the pain of uncertainty has been replaced with the grief of loss. Faith Montero, Kylie's sister, who had been tirelessly seeking answers, now faces the tragic reality that her sister's life was taken. The arrest of Greg Groom has left many unanswered questions, particularly about the events leading up to Kylie's death. The case has sparked an outcry in the community and has raised further concerns about the dangers of abusive relationships, especially for vulnerable young people like Kylie. While the investigation continues, the discovery of Kylie's remains and the arrest of Greg Groom have brought the case to a new and harrowing chapter. As the legal proceedings unfold, the impact of this case continues to reverberate throughout the community, drawing attention to the systemic failures that allowed a young woman to fall into harm's way. Kylie's story has become a painful reminder of the importance of teen safety, the hidden dangers of domestic violence, and the need for more robust support systems for vulnerable individuals.
If you found this story as haunting and unsettling as we did, Don't let Kylie's case slip into the shadows. Her family, her community, and even you could be the key to finding her. If you have any information, no matter how small, please reach out to the authorities. And if you want to stay updated on this case and similar ones, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we can make a difference. Let's keep the conversation going and raise awareness. We won't stop until the truth comes to light.